Our second speaker of the evening is Eric Thomas. Eric is president of the Quinte Secular Humanist Association. In 2011, he was speaker at the National Human Association Conference. That would be Humanist Association Conference, I think. He's a licensed officiant for the province of Ontario and a member of the Humanist Association of Canada. He's participated in a number of local press interviews, and a couple of years ago he took part in a debate with Cobourg Baptists on the theme, "Can we be good without God?" As a former Baptist, I would have loved to have been there. His corporate career has involved several multinational corporations, Sony, Procter & Gamble, and on a personal level, he likes to describe himself as a self-taught man, an autodidact, is that right? Or autodidactic. Okay. He has a 1,500 volume library, and he also likes to say about himself that, now this will surprise you, my favorite book and only book I would want if marooned on a desert island is a dictionary. So, please welcome Eric Thomas.
We're here to talk about freedom of conscience. The definition of tonight's chat might be conscience and disambiguation. Disambiguation being a great big long word that means make clear. My conscience allowed me the freedom to start this oh so formal presentation with a witty little ditty. Okay, it was the middle of the night and I've been working on this for a while. Addressing as it does the arts, our discussion is in several parts. As many big words as my conscience would allow for an admitted and humorless word-sick fellow. With more hyperbole than my conscience might permit, shall I slap my verbose self and get at it? I hope to shed some light and opinion on the subject at hand. My caveat is that I may sway towards the secular, and as much as my conscience will allow. I am unabashedly non-religious, so comparative analysis may, okay, will, creep in. If I offend, I apologize up front. I extend a serious and respectful hand of collaboration. Thank you. So our discussion is in several parts: the science, non-secular conscience, the personal, the legacy, and some introspection. First, the science. Freedom of conscience may well be an illusion. I hope to convince you that it is not. A basic tenet of science is that an experiment must be repeatable, verifiable to be true. Can we replicate a thought process that determines a conscientiously conscious decision? I don't think so. Science is honest enough to say this is true as today's knowledge can make it. And with apology to the Greek schools of philosophy, freedom of conscience may only be as honest as the moment the decision is made. Will you make the same decision based on the same facts the second time around? Probably. Does your thought process consider a new depth of understanding in the very next moment? Because I didn't know that yesterday, but now I know it really well. Maybe. Also, yes, and therefore your decision may change if your conscience allows it. Greek philosophers agonized and occasionally died of their own choice when faced with the question, what is real? The choice of ignoring your conscience and leading a hedonist lifestyle was common. Woohoo. A classic example of an absence of conscience, not necessarily narcissistic. Claire, did I say that right? Narcissistic. There's too many S's. Is it okay? Okay. Yeah. Narcissistic. Too many S's. So a classic example of an absence of conscience, not necessarily narcissistic based, but certainly self-serving, is the Catholic Church position on the status of women. My daughter's learning this. Where is their conscience when half of humanity's population is discarded? The social paradigm changed 1,000 years ago. When will we have a female pope? Not in the near future. And I think that Muslim doctrine has a similar problem, albeit a veiled one. Thank you, tough crowd. But before you tilt at this windmill, or for those who enjoy arguing with zealots, consider the argument of, and this came from the bishops, the Baptists rather, of Coburg, prove that the sun will rise in the east tomorrow, so therefore science is wrong. Is science correct? Will the sun rise in the east? Probably yes, with a very minor chance of no. Not guaranteed, therefore it must be no. Therefore there is going to be no pope, lady, or losing the veil. And their conscience is not in the least bit fettered. Freedom of conscience by willful blindness, one of my favorite subjects. Consider the science of neurological evolution. Succinctly, what the heck were we thinking? And why were we thinking it at all? Intuition is definitely evolutionary, is conscience. Neuroscientist and author Sam Harris believes that we are mistaken in believing the intuitive idea that intention initiates actions. In fact, Harris is even critical of the idea that free will is intuitive. He says, careful introspection can cast doubt on free will. Harris argues, thoughts simply arise in the brain. What else could they do? The truth about us is even stranger than we may suppose. The illusion of free will is in itself an illusion. Consider the science of sociological evolution, how we respond to a group of peers, the Bancroft crowd, or our tribe is considered natural growth, even as the responses mature and change. The realm of the group is not the same as the realm of the singular. My ego, my narcissism, my susceptibility to societal norm is not yours. However, we all respond to society's expectations. We really do. See this quote regarding Adolf Eichmann of Nazi killer fame. Eichmann, and this is a quote, Eichmann did not need to close his ears to the voice of conscience. Not because he had none, but because his conscience spoke with a respectable voice. End quote. With the voice of the respectable society around him. Now granted, we could have a long discussion about the respectability of the society. American Samuel Johnson in 1775 stated, "No man's conscience can tell him the right of another man." And this is important for secular consideration. How is a comparison of my conscience to yours, therefore, to our shared society as a whole, balanced to the science of evolution? Decisions, conscious or not, are made from the data dump of the neurons firing in that great gray glob of gray matter we call our brain. Sounds profound and sexy, doesn't it? Maybe not. Oh, we saunter down the garden path to reality and secularism. So scientifically, science is not so much science as art. Let's look at the subject with an open-minded, contrarian, and maybe even artistic perspective. Why is conscience defined with a focus on good? Why the focus on morals and altruism? Our human condition is a blend of good and bad. If conscience is about our innermost decisions based only on what is good, why not the bad side? Am I scaring anybody yet about the dark side? Has anyone just had the thought, maybe what I did in my hormonal youth wasn't so bad after all? Are the eyes rolling back as in Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Maybe it's not all about the good side. If your freedom of conscience is thinking both good and bad, I suggest we go back to the Sam Harris thought. Freedom of conscience is about neurons firing in our brains, the great gray glob of goop that we just don't understand yet. Our conscionable control of the output or action is the best we can do, the best we can hope for. By the way, who defines best? And thank you for the plural, my psychosis? Is that right? Psychosis? You told me, I can't read email. Yeah, SES. Multiple psychotic occurrences. Is that easier? My psychoses. What is empirical is real. What aids evolution is worthwhile. What does not aid evolution is not in our long-term interest. The scientific history of our subject quickly becomes philosophical, not scientific. If the subject is philosophy and not science, then let's get to it. What do you think? The secular implication here seems obvious, but I digress from the science, which is my segue anyway. And this might be the apology part to which I referred at the very beginning. Is there a non-secular conscience as a philosophy? I wrote that sentence and then thought about it 29 times and thought that's way too obvious. Is there a non-secular conscience as a philosophy? Well, yes, there is. As a matter of obvious fact, there are thousands of dogmatic dictates. I changed the adjective inventive to a noun. I actually thought I invented a word, but no. The noun invented is indeed a word I invented. So a person, usually a charismatic, erudite salesman type, wrote down his thoughts, frequently claiming the thoughts came from somewhere else, the writing itself being a significant accomplishment given the time of our life or the epoch that it was written in. Our author then told anyone who would listen what he had been told to tell them, because it was certainly not he that had invented the thought. Oh no, not I, said the spider to the fly. And he told some of them who would not listen, as in children, that the thoughts told him to beat them or stone them if they didn't listen and do as he said. That's what the thoughts told him to tell them that he'd been told, I think. So he told them all about what their conscience should tell them. It's a secular joke. Examples of the more popular authors included Jesus, Stalin, Muhammad, Mao, L. Ron Hubbard, and your mother. Only one of those folks deserves our respect and whom I believe to be correct and listened to, and I have the marks to prove it. Does anyone else see the connection between our discussion on science and art? Someone invented a thought. That's art. Did the thoughts come from an ephemeral, foggy underworld? Maybe. Well, that would be science. If these conscience-making inventives are scientific, then replicate the damned experiment, and we'll all shut up and agree your way is the only way, and I needn't do all this painful conscience search and thinking anymore. It's so much easier if I just do as I'm told and live life as a tourist, watching the world go by the way someone else decides that I should, while giving me a total freedom of conscience. Ain't my fault. It's Bill's. Speaking, I'm going to skip that, because do only what someone else has told you, your own conscience has told you to, according to their reading of the original inventive? Whew, how's that for circular, water-driven religious logic? Hydraulic to a fault, and my children's favorite expression is this. It's a visual. Lest we think I am picking on religion, and this is reasonably serious, folks, lest we think I'm picking on religion. Okay, a little bit. Religion is not, or excuse me, the inventive is not restricted to a religious application. Politics and governments share the terror of the inventive. I recently finished reading Matthew White's great big book of horrible things, which the cover says, in a very serious way, it is the definitive chronicle of history's 100 worst atrocities. The top 100 mass murders, defined as war, by the way, have a minimum of 300,000 people killed to qualify for the list. And I get goosebumps when I read this. So Idi Amin, Vlad the Impaler, Cubas, Fidel Castro, Jonestowns, Jim Jones, or Osama bin Laden are just over-publicized bad people. Of the top 100 atrocities, only 32 are ideological multicide, and of those, only 13 are specifically religious. The rest, I assume, have an unfathomable freedom of conscience, because I just don't understand how they could do such a thing. For a large part of the Earth's history, a non-secular conscience may have been necessary, mostly due to education. Some of us are of the opinion that it was a contrived necessity coming from a source that accrued huge power and money from the effort. The conscience of the masses was and is delivered to the uneducated world with sufficient personal and corporate value to warrant a next fiscal quarter for the corporation. The education of the masses and the enabling technology were not devolved until 1439, Mr. Gutenberg, or 1991, Mr. Internet. Let me cite a business analogy. The latest Christian fiscal quarter has been 2,000 years, but their fiscal cliff arrived some time ago. The Christian product focus and marketing initiative is directed to countries where the level of education is low enough to accept, fondly, with a freedom of conscience based on an inventive, that most of humanity also accepted 1,000 years ago. The parts of the world that still allow external control of their conscience also wrestle with basic freedom. The correlation being freedom of conscience and basic freedom become connected with education. I'm going to skip the section on freedom of conscience in Wall Street. Just there is a growing mainstream backlash that questions how corporate conscience fits with Bay Street's pursuit of their corporate holy grail of growth alone. If there is a dividend in secular Wall Street, it's one focused on living on earth as if we intended to stay, not just visit, in a sustainable world, not a short-sighted, charismatic, erudite salesman type of world, and the questionable promise. Interesting how the juxtaposition of Wall Street and the house with the plus sign go together. How does their freedom of conscience work out? The noise and vortex of a society struggling with focus and their freedom of conscience involves from the individual input. I'm talking about a society here, not the other way around. The egg came first, not the chicken. Think about that. Our personal conscience is to be shared, however. And if there's another, what's that word they use? Sin. It's the sin of not sharing my cookies in kindergarten with my Bancroft class, because I started kindergarten here. I really, really should have shared those cookies. If there's anybody here that didn't get a cookie, I've got some. So lastly, our legacy and introspection. The word conscience derives etymologically from the Latin conscientia, meaning privity of knowledge, or with knowledge, the English word implies internal awareness of a moral standard in the mind concerning the quality of one's motives, as well as a consciousness of our own actions. Damn. Way too many adjectives for me, Mr. Oxford. I mean, really, what the hell does internal awareness mean? I don't do yoga. And how does that help define a conscience? Well, at least the quality of one's motives and privity of knowledge makes further clarification moot. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So let me take a crack at a Bancroft definition. Our legacy for future generations and our own freedom of conscience is that we have contributed to evolution in a positive manner. Freedom of conscience is as simple as a feeling. It's as simple as thinking about, why do I and my tribe feel this way? Above all, freedom of conscience is addressing the natural human tendency to be willfully blind to implications of our decisions, to discuss subjects with each other with honesty and respect. Freedom of conscience is part of humanity, is part of evolution, it's part of us. We will decide what to do with freedom of conscience, with our own and with our tribes. So in closing, something for you to think about on the way home, just in case this has been way too erudite for us, because it certainly has been for me. My closing comment is, why do conscience and nonsense rhyme? Thank you.